Today, for the primary stages off-Broadway oral history project, we are interviewing Walter Hadler, and we will include later Georgia Hadler. This is Wednesday, July 15th, 2015. Welcome to our group,
Thank you
Walter.
very much,
This is so
Sally.
wonderful.
It's a pleasure being here.
Let's start at the beginning. Where did you grow up?
A town called Houston, Pennsylvania. 2,500 people. It's south of Pittsburgh, north of Wheeling, West Virginia. A little town.
Was it a mining town or a steel town?
There were mines around there. My dad was a miner at one point. He had an auto accident and got out of that field. Owned gas stations and a few things like that. But he lost an eye in that accident. He had a plate in his head and his brother was killed. His brother just came back from World War II. He'd been a pilot, B-17. He took his discharge money and he bought a new car and they went out and probably got drunk and wrecked it.
And then what happened? So how many people are left in your family? Are you an only child now? Or
My sister is still alive, yeah.
And did your family have movies or theater or radio when you were growing up?
Oh, there was a radio, yes.
All right.
Yes.
Was that your major influence when you were a child?
Yes. I recall lying under the radio and listening to that, and The Shadow, and Let's Pretend, and all that sort of stuff. It's great escape.
What kind of high school did you go to? Or regular school before you went to high school?
Regular school, well, we did transfer around because we lived in a kind of a project for ex-service people after World War II, and they moved those kids to different schools. So I went through Cannonsburg schools and then Houston. But they were very advanced schools compared to what I had been trained in. Mm-hmm. It was tricky. And then I went to Chartiers High School, which is now called Chartiers Houston High School. They expanded it. And graduated from high school. And promptly left for Cleveland to work in the automobile factory, General Motors. Mm-hmm. I had relatives who were already up there, and did that for a month, and it was kind of interesting. And then I went in the Air Force, mm-hmm. which was very, very interesting, although it was a drag in a certain way, being, under the control of that world. But that's where I sort of got interested in a lot of other things. Theater.
Once you were in the Air Force?
Yeah.
So
started going to school, started taking courses when I was in Japan at Yokota Air Force Base. The University of Maryland had an excellent program. And I took all sorts of courses there. And when I came back, I was stationed at Bowling in D.C., across the river from the Pentagon. I continued studying there and took courses there and got my freshman year out of the way before I got to the University of Maryland. And then I started as a sophomore and got through there in 3 years. Did some graduate work as well. And then I decided I had better come to New York and get going in the theater because I got involved in theater in a much more active way when I was in college.
Before you went into the Air Force?
No, that was after.
Oh, after, okay.
Yeah.
Before you went in the Air Force, in school, did you ever go see any of the plays that were being done in school, or?
Well, let's see. I don't think they had any. Mm-hmm. I do recall Vaughn Monroe coming through and singing "Ghost Riders in the Sky."
Favorite
that was
song.
Exciting. He was on his way down, but he was playing everything, and that was nice. It's sort of. Movies were the main thing.
You saw the movies,
yeah,
all right.
Of course. Yeah.
What were your favorite movies then?
I liked A Place in the Sun, Montgomery Clift, Elizabeth Taylor. I think that's the name of it.
Right.
That was good. And,
did you go every week? Did you go with your sister?
No, just my chums.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
So you hung out
spent
together?
a lot of time when I was a kid in the forest, in the woods. I used to trap and hunt and stuff like that. And I really loved that. I still do, but I don't do it now. Mm-hmm. And it was wonderful. I love that environment.
Being outdoors.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
So what drove you to be inside in theater? What interested you when you finally saw your first?
When I was what sort of got me interested was when I was stationed in D.C. If you wore your uniform, you got to go to see the plays at I forget the name of that major theater in D.C. Free. And I went in and I saw a play that I didn't know much about, and it stunned me. It still stuns me. And it was Peter Brook's production of King Lear with Paul Scofield, and it was like awesome. And I had no idea you could do things so simply that are so elaborate and still pack such a punch. It just really thrilled me, and still does.
Mm-hmm.
And then I followed that up with another one with Zero Mostel called Fiddler on the Roof, which was fantastic. And Zero was a massive presence and wonderful in the film. I came to know one of the actors when I was working in the Shakespeare Festival when I came to New York, Charlie Durning. He played the village priest.
Mm-hmm.
And he was so funny. Charlie's a very wonderful actor. When he would just come on stage, the audience would begin, anything he would do, they would laugh. And Zero was such a big egotist, he would go up and block him off from the audience. Eventually they wrote Charlie out of the play. Because he was that good. But Zero was fantastic.
And this is Charles Durning, right?
I'm so happy I got a chance to see him. Scofield was amazing. And so was that piece.
So when you saw Lear for the first, that was your first Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And it was.
I saw Midsummer Night's Dream maybe on television or something like that.
So the language was no problem for you? Even
Well,
though this
it was a little bit. But in the Appalachia where I grew up, they say, in a certain kind of way, that the language is similar in some ways to Elizabethan. And some of it is, in fact. It sounds similar in some ways. So people have done some studies on that I've seen.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Very.
Yeah.
So then what happened after you saw Lear?
Okay.
What did you do?
I went back home and studied for my classes after that and continued that. And I started dating as many people as I could. And I met a nurse in one of the classes. And we did a lot of traveling around, went to concerts and things like this in D.C. Got to know D.C. very well. And I eventually came to live there for a while. When I was in graduate school, I had an apartment in the city.
So you graduated you were in college, and then
Yeah.
you graduated. What was your specialty?
Well, it was sort of a general studies course.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they called it. Because there was psychology, philosophy, theater I got involved in.
Mm-hmm.
And I started acting. When I was taking a course in public speaking, which I thought I'd get out of the way before I got in front of people, and I was at the Pentagon, and I gave a speech, and you had to give a speech on your favorite speaker. And most of the guys who were taking the course had the same idea I did, and most of them were officers, and they were like trying to get it out of the way, and they would say, my dad, or the president. And I'd get up and talk about somebody, and they were amazed. And afterward, the professor came up to me, and he said, are you interested in theater? And I didn't know much about it. His name was Herb Rogers. He was from Purdue. And I said, he said, if you come out here to Maryland, to College Park, look me up. And I did when I got out there. And I got involved. He had an experimental theater workshop, which I did a couple of pieces, started directing. Some Tennessee Williams, Hello from Bertha, The Lady of Roxburgh Ocean. A few other pieces, and got involved in acting there.
Mm-hmm.
Arthur Miller's play, Death of a Salesman.
Right.
I played his wife. That was a tricky part. No, I just made that up.
An all-male school. Yeah.
Attention must be paid. No, I played Biff, and
Wow, nice.
it was fun. It was interesting. I loved that world.
Yeah.
And I like theater because it gave me an opportunity not to be going directly into prison in a certain kind of way, it took my mind off things and gave me a chance to explore the things I came to explore when I got to Genesis and
Right.
in the theater in general. I mean, like even this gal, that's why I like her work.
Mm-hmm.
She explores stuff that is really tough to write about.
Right.
And she's very courageous. I was amazed at her.
These are the plays of Sarah Kane that he brought in today for us to look at.
Yeah.
So when you were performing and directing and acting in school,
Mm-hmm.
did you were an officer and that's what made your money? You weren't working anymore with automobiles.
Well, no. When I was in school, I had a partial scholarship.
Okay.
An academic scholarship that I got because of being in the service, because
Right.
of the grades that I had. My uncle, who was a chief engineer in L.A. at Pacific Tubing, I got some money from him to get rolling into college, and he helped me do that.
So when you got out of the service,
Yeah.
then what? Did you see action when you were in the service?
No.
Were you engaged in
Nothing official.
Mhm.
Just a few things, but nothing.
Did you leave the country or did you stay?
I was stationed in Japan.
Oh, that's right. What happened in Japan? What did you see in Japan?
Oh, it was great. Well, it was hard at first for me because I was a hillbilly kind of person. And I had sort of been brought up in the thing of, we hate these people. And it took me a while to get that out of my system. And eventually I did. And I grew to really love the place. It's a beautiful, beautiful place, and the people are fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent a lot of time there, hanging out with people in bars and stuff, and going to Tokyo. Yokota, which is the name of the base, is still there, and it's still active. It's one of the few left in the Pacific that we use. And it used to be a Japanese base while they were in the war. And I had a good time there. And I went to school there also. You know, they had, University of Maryland had this, the largest, well, this was before TV had Phoenix and all this stuff that you can sign up and they'll take your money and screw you the way they're doing to so many with these foreign and phony programs. But this is a real thing.
Did you see a lot of Japanese theater when you were there?
Some. I saw the Russian ballet first time. But we were young guys. We didn't, I mean, I was also then, and we did a lot of roaming around, a lot of chasing women and things like that.
That was more important. This is like in the 50s,
Yes,
are we
it
talking
was.
now? About what year was this?
Huh?
What year was this?
I was in that service from 56 to 60.
Mm-hmm. Did you see any Japanese films while you were there? You were involved in that culture at all?
One, not many.
All right.
I did see one movie, an American movie called Sayonara, with Brando and Red Buttons and Michiko Yumeki and others. And it was interesting because when I saw it, and I saw it with a Japanese audience,
What did they think?
well, I noticed that they laughed at the spots that were very moving to me, and it was just a very different, they were having a different experience, completely different, and understandably so.
Right.
I mean, it's like some of these things I've seen where the cowboys and Indians are shown overseas in some countries. Like I saw some of this in African places, where the Indians shoot the American cowboy, and the audience really is a loud cheer kind of thing. Well, it was like that a little bit, you know, a little culture shock.
Yep. So then you left the Army.
Yes.
Or the Air Force.
Yeah.
And what happened then?
I went from there straight to school. I got out in September '56 on the 9th, and on the 10th I went right into school.
And then what happened when you left school?
Got an apartment, College Park.
We're still in Washington, D.C.
Okay, but I moved out of D.C. and into Maryland.
Okay, right. College Park, Maryland.
College Park is. And you started graduate school.
You started graduate school, I thought.
Yeah, that was after this, though. I had to get through.
Thought you'd be a lawyer, I believe.
Ah,
Yeah.
training to be a lawyer.
I got accepted to law school.
Okay.
And,
And then what happened? Were you still involved in theater? Did you get involved in theater groups near you in college?
yes,
Park.
this guy Herb Rogers, who taught this
That's where he
speech
had
class
his-
at the Pentagon, had this experimental theater program, and I got involved in that. I got involved in it as a director, and I didn't know could handle that, and I was happy to do that, and it was something that I had a talent for.
What did experimental mean in that group?
It could be plays that the students were writing.
Ah.
It could be Tennessee Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Plays that dealt with difficult points, difficult issues. Who you are, why you're here, what's the meaning of existence, those kind of toughies.
So that was sort of the philosophy of his theater company?
Well, it was whatever he wanted to do in a certain way, provided it was something interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't mess around in a sense of just trying to reproduce soap operas, although
Right.
they can be interesting too.
So you acted, directed, and did you write for this group as well?
No. Separately, I did a lot of writing. I was going through some of it and reading it to Georgia the other day, and it was like tons of words.
Yeah.
Amazing. But I knew shorthand, which was something I picked up when I was stationed overseas. I took that, and I had a lot of notes that I used to make in class in shorthand and what have you. And it was interesting to see. I don't do that anymore, but how much I use that.
So then how did you get out of College Park?
Let's see. A guy named Pete Laska, who was also stationed where I was stationed, and I didn't know him then, in Japan, was majoring in philosophy, and we were interested in each other. And with discussions, we were interested in writers, Dostoevsky, etc. Suggested that we look for a place in D.C. And his uncle was a big man in the Veterans Administration, number 2, I think. And he got us a spot near the Marine Barracks on 8th Street. 8th Street and G, Avenue G, Southeast DC.
And then did you get involved in theater there?
From there? No, I did do some theater in DC though. They had a little theater called Theater Lobby. It was in a play called The Firebugs, Max Fritsch play.
Yeah.
And I played one of the arsonists.
It's a great play, yeah.
That was fun. And also, as a result of that, we formed, as I was leaving school, we started forming a theater called Artist Repertory Theater in Rockville, Maryland. And Dale's sister was involved in this.
Dad's sister.
Yeah. And she was great. She was a great help. Dick Coe was a critic for the Washington Post at the time, and he was a big help.
What kind of shows did you do?
What kind of?
Shows did you do? Plays did you put on?
Some musicals. Bob Calvin did something there. Solid Gold Cadillac, I think he did. And I played a character named Stanley Kowalski. And I remember it vividly, because at one point some people, guys stood up and started yelling, "Give it to him, Stan! Give it to him!" Good grief.
How long did that run, that theater?
Maybe a year. Yeah.
Who else was involved in it besides you and Robert Calvin?
Well, he was involved, but not with me. He was involved with Herb, who was the director.
Mm-hmm.
I was an actor.
And then what happened after that? What brought you to New York?
Okay.
What was the lure?
Yeah. Well, I sort of had. When I first came up to New York, I came up with a young woman who was smart and was a cosmopolitan kind of person. And her dad had been the cultural ambassador, American cultural attaché in London, and she'd lived there. And she'd studied in Munich, and she really knew kind of a lot of stuff. And it was wonderful to be with somebody like that. And we came up to New York, and we stayed in the hotel, which is no longer there, where O'Neill was born, on the corner of 43rd and Times Square.
Do you remember the name?
Northwestern or something like that, I forget it.
New Yorker.
Eh?
Wasn't it called the New Yorker?
Maybe, no, that's down further, that's on 34th.
Yeah.
I
Anyway,
got a new song, it just came out. This land is your land from 38th Street to 39th Street. A little addition to the Pete Seeger scene. But we came up here, and I loved this city immediately. And one of the I went with some guys once, and the first place we went was a little place downtown called Jonas Schibel's.
right.
On Houston Street, and I got introduced to a lot of stuff. Now these guys were hipsters from New York City, and it was great meeting it that way. But Barbara, who I came up with, and I went to see a play called The Blacks, or a clown show, and it completely blew my mind, this play.
Where was it
Genet's
done?
play.
Where was it done? What theater? Do you remember?
Yeah, St. Mark's. You know St. Mark's Theater before it became the Negro Ensemble Company. And Godfrey Cambridge was in it. A lot of famous black actors were in it. Roscoe Lee Brown won a lot of awards, but I knew nothing about it. And we were sitting there in the front row, and they asked, Genet writes in it, well, at least one white person in the audience while this play is going on. And they came over, the actors came over, and they asked me, well, you will come up here and be on stage with us. And you're sort of like the figure in the trial that's going to be put to death. You represent the white influence in a kind of a way. And it felt great doing it though. And the audience, I had got a few laughs. The audience enjoyed it. And the actors were great. They really were, they embraced me in a certain kind of way.
What year was this? Approximately.
62, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. But I had I'd heard about Lee Strasberg and Stella Adler, and I wanted to study with her for some reason. I don't know why, but I took courses with Lee at the Carnegie Hall. This was where he taught, and he was really good with the women's students. And the guys sort of ignored, where Stella was more interested in evolving another kind of energy. But she came from a tradition that was amazing. She came from the Yiddish theater, and she had all that world around her, and you got to know that a little bit. So I got plugged into the world of history, theater history, in a way that was wonderful.
Right.
And I loved her approach, which was imagination, and she was such a grand woman at that time. And Harold Kuhlman was deadly in love with her and all this kind of thing. But she was a good teacher and a very good, a good help for an actor, I thought.
How long did you study with her?
A couple of years, on and off. I studied with Michael Kahn also. And
He directed one of your plays as well.
I don't know if
The Reimers
yeah,
of Aldrich.
yes, that was a Lanford
The
Wilson
Reimers of
play.
Aldrich.
Yeah, we did that off Broadway.
Right.
At the theater,
Right.
Cherry Lane, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
So then,
Susan
were you
Terrell
looking?
was in that also. Kevin, it was great. It was a good thing.
Were you looking for work at the same time that you were studying?
Yeah. I wasn't involved. This is when Georgia was already involved, I think, at Theater Genesis. I didn't know about that yet, the downtown scene. I was more interested in an uptown career.
Right.
Then I got involved a little bit with Peter Schumann and the Bread and Puppet Theater.
Nice.
Bob Nichols, we did the famous Fire and other plays like that. Now, some of that kind of thing I started getting involved with.
Were you acting then, or just
Acting,
directing as
yeah.
well? Okay.
Yeah, helping out any way I could.
Lovely.
And I like the spirit of what Peter Schumann was trying to do, and I still do.
How would you define that spirit?
exploratory. It wasn't already defined. The puppets that he worked with and the work that he made and the things that you came in contact with were really quality stuff, and still are, in fact. And it was kind of a European feeling to him. I mean, he was from, I think, Germany or somewhere like that, and he brought this knowledge with him, and that was good to work with. But that didn't last too long. I did that for a while.
Was it politically based and community based?
Yes, it was community and by definition politically, yeah.
And did you do most of your performances in the street?
Well, in the little theater we had at that time near Christopher Street,
Okay.
we used to have these little lofts and things that people worked in. But I did work with later in life at the Cell Block Theater. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
No. Where was it?
It was in the city. It was here, and what we used to do is we worked with recently released offenders at the place, and we did improvs with them and helped them readapt to civilian life, and any way we could,
Was this
using
before
theatrical techniques.
Was this before David Rothenberg did his work with the castle and the people involved there? About what year are you talking about?
Yeah, I don't know. When was David Castle?
No, David has a place called The Castle, but he had his inmates create a play called The Castle as well. All right.
I don't know.
Okay, he wasn't involved.
Yeah.
So where did you do these plays?
Well, we worked over on the, not on the Lower East Side, but on the East Side.
Mm-hmm.
And the plays were done in the loft where we worked with the people who'd been in the joint.
Mm-hmm.
And we would find ways to sort of help them deal with their emotions in a more constructive way.
Mm-hmm.
One girl, I remember saying to her, "Why did you shoot that guy with that shotgun?" And she said to me, "I told you I was hungry." And it's very direct stuff, but very difficult. I remember one guy who was coming out of the bathroom, and I said, he was a big guy, about 6'4", and I said, "You look like Frankenstein right now." And it really hurt him, and it was amazing to me that how tender his sense of himself was. And these were hard people to work with, and some of that kind of stuff.
Were you helping them write the plays that they were performing?
Well, we improvised stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, scenes where you would apply for jobs, scenes where you would encounter people who would give you problems,
Right.
and how to work your way through that without punching somebody instantly and stuff like that.
Is it still working, this Cell Block Theater?
I don't think so. I forget the guy's name who founded it.
That's a really great idea. Right.
Yeah, it was okay.
So when you were working with them, were you also acting other places, or directing, or writing?
Yeah.
That was late in your year, I mean, that was,
Later.
yes.
Oh, yeah.
The end of Dennis's
Oh, yeah.
years.
Yes, that's good.
So you worked at La Mama around 1961, doing, After Star Drive, or is that the name?
Yeah,
of the play?
Olan Jones wrote that, and Kathleen Kramer, right.
So did you get involved in La Mama when you were over on the east side?
That was the first time I acted at La Mama. I had a play done there called The Air Conditioned Beach that Daphne Nathanson directed. It was okay.
So what was the scene like on the east side when you finally settled in New York? What was New York like when you first came here?
It was great. It was great. I mean, for one thing, it was human.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's just money.
Yeah.
It's just, somebody said, Bob Heidi, I think, the fascism of landlords. And there's something to that. I mean, that's the deal in this city now. And almost everybody I know who was here then is now out on the West Coast, doing a lot of good theater and a lot of good stuff. Olan has a company out there, for example, and Tony lives out there, Tony Barsha,
Barsha,
director of
right,
Genesis.
right.
Murray Mendick,
Mm-hmm.
when he left Genesis after the fire ended on our career with that theater, my career with that theater.
Did you see, what shows did you see when you came here finally? Did you see off-Broadway shows? Did you see Broadway shows when you came here?
Yes, I saw Broadway shows. One of the most important was the persecution and assassination of Marat Sade by the inmates of Charenton, Peter Brook's thing. It was an improv thing that he made with these actors. And that was a revelation to see that you could do things like that with people who you couldn't tell if they were inmates or what. But it was really very interesting and very stimulating, very enlivening. And that's still true with his work. I mean, he's a wonderful, wonderfully sensitive director.
Did you ever get to talk to him or work with him?
Yes. Yeah.
When?
And at different places.
Did you get to work with him?
No, I never
Okay.
have worked with him.
Right. So what did you see off-Broadway?
The Brig, The Connection,
And they were being
The
done where?
Kitchen.
Where were those two being done? At the Loft?
They had a theater on 14th Street. I think it was called the Living Theater.
Right.
And I loved The Brig, and I really liked The Connection. I was impressed. Jack Gelber, I think, wrote it.
Right.
And I was amazed that you could do that kind of thing that way, that well. And I knew some of the people, Warren Finnerty, and he was in it.
But later.
Really?
Later.
Oh, later?
You met Warren later. You didn't
Thank
know
you.
Warren when he
This
was
was my chronologist. My memory chronologist. Hooray, hooray.
So who else did you see besides the Living Theater? You saw The Kitchen.
Yeah. And one of the important plays that I saw
Yeah.
was at Joe Chino's Cafe, Chino's Theater. And it was called Lady,
The Madness of Lady Bride.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
yes. And that was really a brilliant little piece of work. And that was interesting, because that got me more interested in writing, because I realized you could write on a lot, you had more room than I thought. I sort of came out of college with this academic framework about how things should be.
Mm-hmm.
And then seeing the work they were doing, was liberating to my own spirit and my own sense of theater, and made it more interesting.
Was that the first show you saw there?
Yes,
And then did you go back and see other shows there?
I probably did, but I don't remember them.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I might have been too drunk or too something. I don't know.
So what other groups did you go see? You saw The Kitchen, you said.
Yeah. Yeah, that was an Honor Weston play, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever see that one?
No.
Interesting. Did any of you ever see that play?
The Kitchen.
We saw it.
Huh?
You and I saw it.
Oh, I mean, besides you, dear.
40 guys that were
That
lined
was a
up
whole
behind the
kitchen
table.
scene. That was the drama of working in the cookroom of the
Right.
kitchen, and that was interesting.
So what I see from you, the things that you see that you really love are things that seem to be realistic. There's a kitchen in the kitchen. There's a Marine base in the Brig, a prison.
Mhm.
There's the Connection, our drug dealers during a jazz set, right? So and the Peter Brook,
Yeah,
crazy people. You don't know if you're there or they're real or they're actors.
yeah.
This is very attractive to you.
Yes, it was. Yeah. But I love the magic of theater. I mean, I saw a movie when I was a kid. I think, A Midsummer Night Dream. Who, if you've ever seen that movie,
Mickey Rooney.
as Puck.
Yeah.
It's
great.
And the rest of that is a brilliant
It is.
stroke of explosive imagination, and I like Strindberg. I like his work a lot. I like his dream plays. I like his realistic plays. I also like Ibsen. And Chekhov I came to later when I worked at Birdcliff with Larry Sakharov, who directed that. And then also at Birdcliff I played the oldest Stanley Kowalski in the history. Rob Thurkill, who was with the Circle Rep,
Right.
directed that. I think he committed suicide. I'm not sure. I heard
Oh.
that once. Yeah.
He
He
did.
did?
It's-
Yeah.
So
He was
what-
the heir to the Ben Gay fortune.
Ah.
So,
I didn't know that. So when you were looking at these plays, did you start to look for a certain kind of company to be with, or a certain kind of theater you loved or wanted to be part of?
yes.
Where'd you find it?
Well, Joe Papp was a good influence on me. When I got to the Shakespeare Festival and auditioned, I was really pathetic. And they said, thank you very much. And I went up to Joe and I said to him, listen, I'm going to be in the theater no matter how badly that went. And he said, oh, okay, you're in. And so I got in that production of Henry V. Is the,
What year was that? Who played Henry? Do you remember?
I didn't play Henry.
No,
Bobby Hooks played him.
All right.
And he was good. And we did the tour afterward. And then Taming of the Shrew and other things.
What year are we talking about? About in the 60s?
Before, before 66.
In the early 60s.
Uh-huh.
That's when I entered. Been
Right.
there for-
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Nothing happened before.
Well, I was studying with Bill Hickey.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and Lynn Masters for vocals.
Mhm.
And she had a studio at Carnegie Hall. She was a great teacher. I was happy to work with her.
Did you ever act with Bill Hickey?
With who?
Bill Hickey?
In class, yeah.
Hmm.
But not in a play.
What was it like working at the Public? Did you work directly with Joe?
Yes. And then we were in Shakespeare in the Park.
Right. Right. Had they already moved to the park, or were they doing?
They already moved.
Mm.
Yeah, the Delacorte was already in place. Joe was great. He was a terrific guy. We need more people like him. He was a communist, but he knew how to shake the city, how to shake the rich people of the city, in just the right way.
Mhm.
And the Delacorte people put their money into that thing, and they did good, and they still do good work.
Right.
But he's a memorable figure in the city, I believe.
Yeah.
I was glad to
How many
come
things
across
did you do for him?
Huh?
How many things did you do for him?
Henry V, Taming of the Shrew, and something else, I forget right now. Met Paul Hecht also, he was there. And I started going then downtown, and I got introduced to a play at Theater Genesis. I auditioned for a play called The Interrogation Room, written by David Scott Milton.
Mm-hmm.
And they were looking for somebody who could be an interrogator.
Mm-hmm.
And Murray Paskin was one of the people who was in the cast. Barbara Etta Young was in it. I think Sully Boyer. And they were looking for me. And I was able to do that role. And it was an interesting experience. And I went from that to other things there. I did a movie called, Jack Milton directed a movie called, I don't know where it is now, but it'll come to me when we're
Sure.
talking.
Who directed The Interrogator, or The Interrogation?
Ralph Cook,
Ralph Cook did?
yes.
What was he like to work with?
Excellent. Yeah, he'd been in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
He was in the Navy in World War II. And he was from California. And he had a California style, which is, Shepard had this also, but Ralph picked it up and knew it before he had that. And he produced him as well. But he was the kind of director who would let you as an actor discover what you were doing. He sort of respected that inner process in the actor. Unlike Hitchcock, who placed people where, you're over here, you're sitting, you're a chair, you're a bird. He let you explore the dimensions of the character and how you approached it, what you wanted to do, work with. And he would say, what are you trying to do?
How long did you get to rehearse a play?
It varied.
I mean, the interrogation, for instance.
I think about a month.
Wow.
Yeah. Sometimes less.
Mm-hmm.
We worked on the Hawk, for example, which came later,
Right.
for 6 months. We went out of the city, rented a farm. And
Oh, right.
became a commune thing. But he was a really solid man and a good guy. He saved my life once.
How so?
I almost drowned. I was caught in a tide out Faro Island. And I was an idiot. But I thought I could conquer anything at that time. And I was going out, and I had lost sight of the land, and I realized I'm in trouble. I looked around, there was Ralph. And he said, "You all right?" I said, "Yeah." He said, I couldn't say I need your help, but he knew what was up, and I went back in with him.
Fabulous.
And we were out there. I had a grant then. Georgia was pregnant with our daughter, and that's what we did with the money.
Mm-hmm.
But that was I love Far Island. It's a wonderful place. At least it used to be. I'm sure it still is.
Yeah. Nature. So then you were with Genesis, and this is about 1964, 66?
Yes.
Somewhere around there, 66.
Yeah.
1966.
Mm-hmm.
And what else did you do for them? That was your first involvement with them, right?
The interrogation room.
Yeah,
Yes.
the interrogation room.
Yeah, that was the first one.
And Ralph Cook picked all these plays, correct?
Oh. Yes. You had readings.
Mm-hmm.
And out of those readings on Mondays, they would pick a play.
Oh, the Monday night workshops.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
He picked the readings also.
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
Ralph chose what would be read at
Right,
Monday nights.
right.
But then it was a kind of open forum.
Right.
Yeah.
So then after you did the interrogation room,
Uh-huh.
did you do more things for them? Was that your inauguration? Did you go right into acting? I have here, you started writing plays.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you do that?
Well, I started that as soon as I got here in New York. I wrote a play. I was living on 15th Street, West 15th Street, in a retired old man sailor's place. And I wrote a piece there about some old guys and a young actor and being involved in going to a church. I think it was St. Patrick's. And one of the old sailors was there, and he was having confession, and the character murders somebody while this is going on. Anyway, that was the first play that I actually wrote. When I got over to Genesis, I got more interested in writing stuff, and the first play I wrote was called Solarium.
Right.
And
In 1968, that was
Right.
done.
And Barbara Etta Young, Beeson Carroll was in it. Michael Brody. Michael Brody just died recently, a year ago. He's been in every one of my plays, in fact. A lot of these guys are going down with cancer now. I'd say people I know. It's amazing. The cigarette thing. Deadly.
So what was Solarium about?
Solarium was about a guy who was in a wheelchair,
Mm-hmm.
who was trapped, and he was living with these two women, an older woman and a young woman who was a town librarian. And it opens with the guy in the wheelchair having a monologue with the moon. And he's just having a private moment. And then he's interrupted by the people who look after him, his caretakers. And we see that world and how it works. a golf ball came sailing on the stage, and the guy who hit it comes along, and the golf ball lands in this large plant which is on the stage at the base of it, and he's looking for his ball, and before he comes on he's yelling "4" stuff like this, and he knows the guy in the wheelchair, and they went to high school together, and he says, "Did you see this? Have you seen my ball?" And they have a little conversation. And he says, "Yeah, it's under the plant there, under the tree." And he's going to get it, going to hit it out. The guy who comes on is wearing golf togs, and he's all dolled up for that. And the guy in the wheelchair says to him, "Would you do me a favor? I'd like a sandwich. Could you sit here while I go up to the clubhouse and get one?"
Mm-hmm.
So the guy, his friend from high school, sits in the chair and puts on his babushka, etc., his rags, and off goes the guy who was in the chair. And the women come back in, and they're here. They don't notice there's any change in a sense, except that he gets a little sassy and gets smacked by the kind librarian in the face. But he gets stuck in that chair, and it's about being trapped by your double. Artaud was a tremendous influence on
And when did
me.
you run into Artaud?
Theater and his double. Huh?
Yeah, when did you read Artaud?
I think in the 50s, 60s, yeah, when I came to New York.
Were you the first person to use this device on the stage in that group?
I don't know.
Because Shepard did something similar to that afterwards.
Oh yeah, he did.
Yes, right.
I've heard this.
Right.
But that's, that happens.
All right, yeah.
Murray and Sam and I did a lot of things that we shared certain views about, especially Murray and I, philosophically, politically, and
Was Artaud part of the
aesthetically.
conversation?
Huh?
Was Artaud part of the conversation?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we did the thing up in the country for
Hawk?
the Keystone Company,
Oh, yes.
it was sort of the main text was his Theater and its Double, and it was one of the things that was attractive about Chino's, the Cafe Chino, was Joe Chino was like a character out of Artaud who was signaling through the flames in his life, and that's what that theater was, and it was amazing that
The Chino.
that he gave himself to this,
Right.
and it was wonderful.
So there seems to be a big difference between the Chino Theater and the Genesis group.
Really.
So would you like to explain what that difference was, or why some of the playwrights in the Chino group would migrate to the Genesis group and stay with Genesis, for instance, and do more of their work there?
Like who?
Like Sam Shepard.
Sam
He
worked
didn't
everywhere.
migrate.
He
He
did.
started, his first plays were done at Genesis, Cowboys and Rock Garden. That's where he got his start. Ralph Cook picked him up. He was a busboy at the,
Right.
not the Five Spot, but there was a jazz place on
Village Gate.
The Village Gate,
Village Gate, right?
right.
And Kevin O'Connor was there, and Leonard Melfi and others. And out of that came, I think, Genesis. And so in that sense, Sam had plays done there and La Mama and other places. But I don't know, there were some people who worked at Chino who came over. For example, Harvey Fierstein came out to me at one point and said, I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Ellen said no dogs, no drugs, no drags." And I said, "Well, you can do it here." And he did the thing. And he was also in a play of mine. He played a prostitute on the Bowery.
What play was that?
The Silver Bee.
Ah,
Yeah. He was terrific. and Norman
Jacobs.
played a guy who lived on a Bowery. And came up with it. We did a vaudeville bit with this part. And Norman pulled out a 1.5-inch penis covered with diamonds and started chasing Harvey around the stage. And Harvey was trying to get rid of him because Harvey was trying to make some money selling his body. So they had a nice turn together.
That's great.
Yeah.
What was the basic difference between the communities that Chino existed in and Genesis existed in?
I don't know, you know.
Would you say the community, the direct community surrounding the theaters was different?
Well, it was on McDougal Street and the Lower East Side. That's different. That's the part on the edge of Little Italy.
Mhm.
That's different.
Mhm. What kind of...
Genesis became known as the heterosexual one of these three. There were 4 theaters: Chino, Judson's, Genesis, and
La Mama?
what?
La Mama?
La Mama.
Yeah.
Thank you. And it became known as exploring this dynamic between men and women
Mhm.
in a way that was explored, not just guys and guys.
Right.
Just that particular thing was. Also, I worked with Arthur Shaner when he was doing plays at the Bridge Theater
Mhm.
before this.
When you say working with as an actor?
In a play, yeah,
Mhm.
that he did. Also, John Arden, I was in a play of his at the
Sergeant Musgrave's Dance.
Yeah.
But that was later than when you... So when you were in... Let's talk about Genesis area when Michael Allen began.
He was the priest, yeah.
Yeah. Well, what did he have? What did he want to do with the theater in that community? He started it, right? The theater group, and he had another person come in.
Well, I don't know if he started it, but Michael Allen was an enlightened man.
Mm-hmm.
And the theater, St. Mark's Church has a tradition of supporting dance, poetry, theater. And in the 30s it did as well.
And that's on 10th Street and 2nd Avenue.
Yes, it is. And for example, in the cellar, beneath the crypt that holds Peter Stuyvesant to this day,
Right.
is a picture of, as big as this table, bigger than this table, of Walter Houston, dressed exactly as Peter Stuyvesant, with one leg and his everything. And it's a picture they made, a giant picture of him when he was working there. And he says underneath, "To the old manse," and he's talking about that little place where St. Mark's Church is located.
Mm-hmm. And so John Houston was working there.
I don't know,
Okay.
but his dad's picture was down there, and it's amazing.
Yeah. So Michael Allen had.
So Michael Allen, I think, was aware of this.
Uh-huh.
When Ralph Cook came to him,
Right.
after his own experiences with his family and his wife, etc., and his own other issues, he talked to Michael about forming some kind of thing with the theater.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a socially useful a service to the community and involve the artists. There were a lot of artists living over there of all sorts.
Well, what kind of community was it? Was it, what ethnic makeup was it, for example?
Everything.
Mm-hmm. And what was were they poor, middle class?
Some of them were rich.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them were dirt poor. But rents were different.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
like 100 times cheaper than they are now.
And did they want this theater to be in the community?
Well, it was in the community.
Mm-hmm. And they supported it. The community supported the theater.
Yeah, it was free then.
Mm-hmm.
You could get what you want,
Right.
stuff like that. Michael sort of took Ralph under his wing and helped get him stabilized in a certain way, I think psychically. And Ralph really wanted to get into theater, and enabled him to have a place to work. And out of that grew Theater Genesis. I mean, it was also the people who worked over with him.
At the Village Gate.
Yeah, at the Village Gate.
So he brought those people over with him to Genesis.
Many of them,
Mhm.
yeah.
And who were those people?
Sam Shepard, Leonard Melfi, Kevin O'Connor,
Lee Kissman.
Huh?
Lee Kissman.
Lee Kissman.
All of them worked at the gate.
Did Murray Mednick come in from that
No.
group? Or no, he
No.
came in from somewhere
No.
else.
Murray did his busboying in the Catskills.
So then so when Ralph Cook got this group together in the theater,
Yeah.
what was his idea of what they wanted to do?
What do you mean?
How many shows was he going to have a year?
Oh, it was a couple of weekends,
Mhm.
something like that.
Did he have he was gonna do so many, 5 or 6 shows a year, and the Monday night workshops were every week, right?
Yes, it's something like that,
Mhm.
right.
And
The Monday night workshops went on as the plays would go on the weekend. And then sometimes the plays seemed to lend themselves to a larger audience that people wanted to see, and they had their own kind of drive, and he recognized that and let that happen.
What kind of theater was he looking for?
Something that was healthy.
And representative of the community, or was he
Well,
looking
yes. Yeah, it came out of the community. It involved the life of the community.
So what kind of influences were on the theater group? Was jazz part of the influence on
So
the
it was
theater
jazz,
group?
certainly on me. I love that. And use it, and still use it.
And how does that
Well,
affect you, the work? How does that affect the work of the artist?
Well, for example, when we worked on The Hawk,
Mhm.
which was the actors would come out and improvise every night their part. And it was never set. There were just a couple of things that were set, but how they would handle that was up to them.
Mhm.
In that sense, you were free. It was like how jazz improvises around a theme. And so in that sense, it was a very direct influence.
Mhm.
But the problems that existed over there with the cops or whatever, drugs, heroin, whatever, cocaine, whatever was around, anything.
So that became subject matter for the plays.
Sure,
Mhm.
part of the life of living in this city.
Mhm. Did the beat poets come over?
Yeah, some of them did. And I think that's how, in a certain kind of way, and I've said this to Georgia also, that Joe Oppenheimer wrote a play, because they used to be called the poets something. I forget, but he wrote a play called The Great American West, which in a certain kind of way set the stage for a lot of the cowboy stuff that came onto the stage in a way.
Was that the Hardware Poets Theater?
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where it came from?
Well, it was influenced by it.
Mm-hmm.
Then the poetry project sort of separated from that, and it became its own thing. Then the dance space came along, and Larry Fagan got that going, and but there was this mutual reinforcement of art, of work.
And how did cowboys become a theme?
I don't know. I have no
It's an
idea.
American mythological
Yeah, maybe it's that.
basis, but I was wondering if that was something
Yeah.
they picked up on.
But when on Oppenheimer's play, if you've ever read it, it's in Poland's book. It's in the front.
Okay.
he gets in touch with something about the American history and the spirit, even though he mixes in contemporary stuff, commercials and things like this. It is very good and very exposes something of the nature of the history of this country.
How was a play like that staged?
I don't know, I didn't see
Oh,
it.
you didn't see it? Okay. I'd like to take a break at this point